Once upon a time in the dusty streets of Enugu, there lived ladies who had been as near, because the threads in a finely woven cloth. Amaka and Azin had been now not born from the equal womb, however. Absolutely everyone called them twins. See how they flow collectively. Humans might say, in case you see one, the opposite is not a ways in the back. Of where an Amaka was bold and pleased, easy turned into quiet and found, and usually the shadow in the back of her pal's light. They shared everything, garments, food, even their innermost secrets and techniques, while Amaka dreamed of existence within the huge city. Easy dreamed at the side of her whilst Izin cried over her struggles. Amaka held her hand and said, "Do not worry, Eie, child, our time will come." However, because the years rolled via the winds of lifestyle started to blow otherwise for the two pals, lifestyles commenced to prefer Amaka in methods Azin should best dream of. Amaka secured a good job with an oil organization, rented a pleasant condominium in Lagos, and observed the kind of man each lady prayed for, a tall, darkish and responsible guy named Tail. She had used lifestyles but stayed the same. She remained in Enugu, teaching in a poorly paid personal faculty, watching her dreams slip via her arms one night. Azin's phone rang. It became Amaka. Her voice turned into full of pleasure. "I.e. a child bet." "What?" Amaka laughed. "What is it?" Amaka, Azin, requested, already knowing it would be something excellent. She proposed, "I'm getting married." Amaka's laughter rang through the telephone like a song. "You may be my maid of honor." "Proper." A's heart sank. She pressured a laughed into the phone. "Ah, Amaka, this is right news of rout. I will be your maid of honor." However, whilst the decision ended, Azin sat quietly gazing the walls of her small room. Her heart felt heavy like a stone sinking to the lowest of a river. "Why constantly her?" she whispered. Her chest burned with envy and tears rolled down her cheeks. That nighttime, because the stars twinkled inside the sky, Azini lay wide awake, wondering. She wasn't simply Azin anymore. She turned into the moon, looking the sun upward, push higher. And, better leaving her behind inside the shadows a few months later, Amaka called with every other request. "Azizi, my landlord has extended my lease in a single day." Amaka said, her tone complete of frustration. "I can't manage to pay for to stay here anymore." She says, "I must move in with him till we get married. However, you know, the way people speak. I want you to return and stay with me, please. It is only for a few months." Azin froze, dwelling with Amaka and Chidi, watching them love and laugh together every day. Her chest tightened on the idea, however. How could she say no? Refusing might simplest make her look jealous, a few she failed to need. Amaka to suspect, K'Ani stated softly after a long pause. "I will come." Days later, with the journey, a heavy coronary heart. Annie packed her small bag. She folded her garments well, but her mind changed into a hurricane. "Can I truly do this?" she whispered to herself. "God deliver me." Strength. The adventure to Lagos was long and tiring. The loud hum of the bus blended with the chatter of different passengers. However, Azina barely noticed her thoughts had been elsewhere, swirling like leaves in the wind when she arrived at Amaka's rental. Amaka greeted her with a heat hug, her smile as bright as ever. "Ei, baby!" "Welcome to Lagos." Chidi stood in the back of Amaka, his tall frame leaning against the doorway. He smiled courteously. "Easy, yay, it's precise to peer you again." "Thanks," Z spoke back, forcing a smile. The condo becomes stunning, simply as Ain had imagined. The fixtures became new, the walls were painted in tender, calming colors, and everything smelled clean. But as she regarded round, she observed small signs of Amaka and Chid's love pics, of them collectively on the partitions, a pair of his shoes beside hers, and a mug that said "Forever Yours." That first night, Time Azin sat on my own in her new room, paying attention to the sound of laughter coming from the dwelling room Amaka and Chidi had been looking. A film, their voices mingling like a sweet melody. Azin stared at the ceiling, her heart heavy. "This could be harder than I thought," she whispered, blinking again. The typhoon tears. She had come to assist her pal, but deep down she knew she'd become stepping into a storm she wasn't equipped for living. With Amaka and Chidi changed into, like sitting by a heat fireplace, however, feeling the warmth burn your pores and skin every day. Azini watched their love unfold earlier than her eyes, and each moment felt like a thorn piercing her coronary heart. Chidi treated Amaka like a queen. Every morning he delivered her breakfast in mattress, steaming tea, golden toast, and eggs cooked just the manner she preferred. "Top morning, my love," he'd say, planting a kiss on her forehead. "Chidi, you will spoil me," Amaka might reply, giggling, as she held his hand at night. They could sit down collectively on the sofa, Chidi massaging Amaka's feet while she informed him approximately her day. "You are my everything," he'd whisper, and Annika's laughter would fill the room like a sweet song. Aini sat within the corner. Small cracks, pretending to read an e-book, but her eyes often wandered to them. Her chest felt tight, her envy developing like weeds in an ignored lawn. But she observed something else too, small cracks of their ideal picture. Annika's temper flared from time to time, snapping at Chidi whilst she was tired. "Chidi, why failed to you purchase the material I asked for," she'd say, her voice sharp. Chidi in turn had his moments. "Mera, you do not want to exit so often, why now? Not stay home and rest?" He endorsed his tone company, but calm. As Zini began to see possibilities in those cracks, she began planting seeds, small. And Sule Amaka, she said one evening after a minor argument between the couple, "I think you have to be greater affected person with Chidi. Men don't like to sense unappreciated." Amaka waved it off with amusing izzy. "It's nothing. Every couple has small fights. Do not worry about us, however." He failed to prevent there whenever Amaka shared frustrations. Izen could nod and say, "You're right, but maybe Chi just does not apprehend you fully. Some guys are like that." Slowly, her phrases have become like tiny drops of water wearing away at a stone. Amaka failed to take it significantly, but Aini felt a odd pride. The sun still shone brightly in Amara's world, but as Zeni, the quiet moon turned into, studying a way to cast shadows. Her bitterness hidden in the back of kind smiles, gentle phrases become developing. Stronger, she wasn't just looking anymore, she was waiting. Azen's envy had grown into something darker, something she ought to not forget about. Watching Amaka and Chid's love felt like status outer within the rain bloodless. And forgotten, she decided, it'd become time to behave. One night Amy stepped into the living room wearing a decent becoming get-dress that hugged her, determined like a second pores and skin. The fabric shimmered beneath the tender light, drawing interest to her every curve. She turned into ready Chitty turned into sitting at the couch watching football, his eyes glued to the display screen. "Chitty, how changed into work nowadays?" Azen asked, her voice smooth and candy. She sat down beside him, plenty nearer than she needed to. Chitty shifted in his seat, glancing at her in brief before looking, returned at the TV what became great. "Ani is Amaka, lower back. She's nonetheless on the marketplace," Ani said with a smile. She leaned ahead slightly, making certain her neckline dipped simply enough to catch his eye. "You are one of these top guy, Chitty. Amaka is honestly lucky to have you." Ever Chitty cleared his throat, uncomfortable. "Thanks, E," he stated fast, before status up. "I will go test on dinner," but E wasn't discouraged. The next day she found any other opportunity JY become inside the bathroom, and she or he, by accident, opened the door. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she gasped, covering her eyes. Adequately, however, she did not go away at once. Chitty grabbed a towel, his face a mix of embarrassment and infection. "Azini, please knock." Subsequent time he said, his voice firm. "I failed to imply to..." She responded, her tone apologetic, however, her smile lingering. "I'll be extra careful in the beginning," Jay attempted to avoid her. He spent extra time at work and less time at domestic. However, A became persistent. She brushed past him within the hallway, her hand grazing his arm. She determined excuses to begin conversations, her words laced with subtle compliments. "Chi, you are so considerate," she stated one night while he delivered Amaka her favorite snack. "Not all guys are like you, Amaka." Is sincerely blessed her intentions were becoming clearer, and Chidi could feel the load of her advances. He did fail to recognize the way to confront her without causing a scene, but her presence changed into turning into tougher to disregard Azen's. Jealousy turned into, now not a quiet shadow, it changed into a hurricane brewing within the corners in their domestic, waiting for the proper second to strike. Chidi could not preserve the load of Azin's behavior to himself anymore. It felt like carrying a pot of boiling water, threatening to spill over at any second. One night time, as Mara sat on their bed, scrolling through her telephone, he took a deep breath and spoke. Mara, there is something I want to tell you, he said, his voice heavy. Amika seemed up, her eyes curious. What is it, Kay? It's about... Aina, he commenced carefully. She's been performing otherwise round me. I don't know how to mention this, but it makes me uncomfortable. Amika frowned, confusion clouding her face. What do you imply? In a different way, she's constantly wearing revealing garments, sitting too near me and, from time to time, even brushing towards me unnecessarily, I assume. I think she's looking to get my attention, in methods that are not right. Amaka's expression darkened, however, not within the manner Kai expected. Her frown grew to become to anger, and she sat up straighter. Chidi, do you hear yourself? Azin is my quality friend, my sister. How can you accuse her of something so horrible? Amaka, I am simply telling you what I have observed, Chidi said, his voice rising barely. I don't suppose she... Well, however... Amaka shook her head, disregarding his phrases. Chidi, you're imagining matters. Perhaps you're the only looking at her the incorrect way. I cannot trust. You will say this about her. Chid's coronary heart sank. He had hoped Amaka would understand, but as a substitute she grew to become the blame on him later that night. Amaka confronted Azen. Her Amaka-faced voice turned into company. However, tinged with disbelief, Chidi stated, you have been behaving inappropriately round him. What is taking place? Ayan gasped, her eyes widening as tears welled up. Amaka, how can Chidi say this type of thing? I'd by no means try this to you. You are my sister, the whole lot. Amaka softened, seeing Azin's tears. I thought so too. I advised him he need to be false impression. I simply needed to pay attention it from you. Of course it's now not actual. Azin cried, wiping her eyes. Chidi, have misinterpreted my moves. Perhaps I have been too friendly. However, it's handiest, because I care approximately you each. Amaka, I swear on the whole lot, I'd by no means hurt. You want that? Amaka hugged her tightly, whispering, I'm sorry for even asking Iyi. I will speak to Chidi. He needs to prevent this nonsense. But at the same time as Amaka comforted her, I's thoughts changed into racing. Chidi had dared to expose her. He wanted to smash her plan. Her tears dried fast, and her coronary heart hardened as the house grew quiet that night. Aina lay in mattress looking at the ceiling, her mind changed into a whirlwind of anger and determination. So Chidi thinks he can conflict a marker approximately me? She whispered to herself. No trouble. I will make certain he in no way receives the chance once more. The hearth of jealousy that were simmering in Easy's heart now blazed, and she or he vowed to cast off Amara from the picture, no matter the value. Azen's mind had been not CL'd. With the aid of doubt, her jealousy had grown into a beast, and he or she turned into equipped to do anything it took to claim Chidi for herself. One morning, as she walked through the bustling marketplace, her eyes fell on a woman promoting herbs in a dim corner. The female's face changed into sharp, her eyes darkish with secrets. And techniques, madam, do you recognize someone who can cope with a problem for me? Ain requested cautiously, her voice slightly above a whisper. The woman raised an eyebrow, her lips curling into a sly smile. What form of trouble? Aina hesitated, her coronary heart pounding in her chest. A person who can make someone disappear. The woman nodded slowly, her smile widening. Follow me. She led Azen via a slim route behind the marketplace, wherein a set of ruffle-searching men sat playing cards. The air was thick with the smell of sweat and cheap liquor. This is Ugo, the woman said, gesturing closer to the chief, a man with scars on his face and bloodless, calculating eyes. Azin's stomach twisted. However, she forced herself to talk. I need your assist. There's someone standing inside the manor of my happiness. I want her. Long past. Ugo leaned lower, back studying her with entertainment long gone. You say you mean dead? Azin swallowed hard, then nodded. Yes, Ugo laughed, a deep, difficult sound. Women and their trouble continually over a person. Why don't you just discover any other one? Ain's face hardened. You do not understand? He's mine. She's the only factor in my manor. Ugo's laughter diminished and he leaned ahead first class. But it's going to value you. I will pay something. It takes, Ain stated quickly, pulling out a package deal of coins. It became all the cash she had saved through the years. However, she failed to care. Ugo took the money, counting it slowly earlier than tucking it into his pocket. We will cope with it, he stated. His voice called, supply us her details. Azen described Amaka. One nighttime, her habitual with the locations she frequented and the time she commonly returned home. Every phrase felt like a knife twisting in her chest. However, she pushed the guilt aside as she walked returned domestic. Her thoughts changed into a whirlwind of emotions. That is, for the pleasant, she whispered to herself, her voice trembling. Once she's long gone, the whole thing will fall into vicinity, but deep inner a small voice whispered, you are betraying her. You are destroying the simplest real bond you've ever had. Az silenced the notion, her resolve hardening like iron. She had already set the wheels in motion, and there was no turning again. The charge of betrayal had been paid, and he or she turned in to prepare to acquire. Then one nighttime Amaka walked briskly, her bag slung over her shoulder. She had stayed past due at work, and the road beforehand seemed darker than ordinary. Abruptly, footsteps echoed at the back of her. At first she did not suppose tons of it, but the steps grew louder, quicker. A sit-back ran down her spine. Who is there? She called out, her voice constant but tinged with fear. Before she ought to flip, sturdy arms grabbed her, pulling her right into a dimly lit alley. She struggled, her return falling to the floor. Please let me move, Am, cried her voice, trembling. I do not have tons money, but you may take the entirety. I've the men surrounded here, their faces shadowed, but their intentions clear. Ugo the chief stepped forward, his scarred face illuminated by means of the dim light. It is now not approximately money, he stated coldly. Then why are you doing this to me? Amaka asked, tears streaming down her face. Ugo's lips curled right into a merciless smile. Your exceptional pal says, hey, Amaka iced up, her breath catching in her throat. Azini, she whispered, disbelief washing over her. No, you are lying. Ani could in no way do this. The guys chuckled, their laughter echoing. In the narrow alley she paid us properly, Ugo said. You were status in her way. Amaka coronary heart shattered into portions. Her legs felt susceptible, her frame trembling as she fell to her knees. Isin is my sister. I have executed the whole lot for her. Why might she do this to me? She clasped her fingers together, her voice breaking as she pleaded, please do not do that. I'll come up with more money than she did. Simply permit me pass. I have a marriage to devise. I've an existence to live. Ugo's expression did not alternate. He nodded to certainly one of his men who pulled out a gun. Sorry, madam, enterprise is enterprise, Ugo said, his voice flat. No, please. Amaka screamed, her voice echoing in the night, time earlier than she ought to modify any extra words. The sound of a gunshot ripped through the air, silencing her cries. Birds scattered into the sky, and the bustling streets of Lagos regarded to pause for a brief moment. The guys disappeared into the darkness, dragging Amaka behind. Her bag lay open at the ground, its contents spilling out, an image of her and Izan smiling together amongst them. The streets carried no trace of her by way of mourning best. The whispers of betrayal lingered, carried by using the wind the subsequent morning. Whispers of betrayal. Azine sat in the living room, ready anxiously for information. She expected to listen about Amaka's death, to cry fake tears and console Chitty. She had rehearsed her traces over and over in her head. Amaka didn't come domestic, ultimate nighttime. JY stated, pacing the living room. His voice trembled, his face pale with fear. Azina sat at the couch, her palms clasped tightly, collectively. She wore a mask of problem. However, in her heart raced, not with fear, but but with the thrill of her plan unfolding. "Perhaps she's caught someplace," Aina said softly. "Visitors in Lagos may be terrible." Chidi shook his head, walking his arms through his hair. "No. She might have called me. This isn't always like her with the aid of afternoon." The news of Amaka's disappearance had spread through her co-workers, friends, and circle of relatives. All known as their voices full of difficulty, Chidi spent the day making frantic phone calls to the police, hospitals, and everyone who would possibly have seen her. Ayan performed her role flawlessly. She stayed through Chidi's aspect, offering consolation and support. "We're going to discover her," she stated, setting a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "She's strong. She'll come lower back." However, as days was weeks, hope started to fade. Chid's eyes grew stupid and the lines on his face deepened. The house as soon as packed with Amaka's laughter, now echoed with silence. Azini used this "I'm here for you" silence to her benefit. She cooked Chid's food, wiped clean the house, and sat with him inside the evenings, taking note of his pain. "You are not by myself, Chidi," she would say, her voice gentle. Chidi, broken by grief, began to lean on her one night as they sat collectively in the dimly lit dwelling room. Izan positioned her. "Give up his chi," she whispered, her voice trembling, simply sufficient to appear honest. "I am right here for you. I will constantly be right here for you." Chidi looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of disappointment and gratitude. "Thanks, Izan. I do not know what I'd do without you in that moment." Ain leaned in and kissed him. Her lips brushed towards his gentle and planned. Chi failed to shy away that night. Time Ain slept in Chid's mattress, her head resting on the same pillow in which Amaka's had as soon as lain. As she drifted off to sleep, a small smile performed on her lips. Amaka become long gone, and Aini had taken her area. The plan had worked. The solar now shone on Azini, while the shadow of her betrayal loomed silently over them. Months surpassed, and played her function as the comforting partner flawlessly. Chidi, still sporting the weight of Amaka's disappearance, began to rely on her more and more. She changed into usually there, cooking his food, easing his burdens, and whispering soft reassurances that matters would by hook or by crook get higher. Then one evening, Azin sat Chidi down, impregnant after dinner. Her face was a aggregate of anxiety and resolution. "Chichi, there may be something I want to tell you," she began, her voice low. "What's it, Chiti?" asked his brow furrowed. "I am pregnant," Ayan stated, her eyes fixed on him. Chiti froze, the burden of her phrases urgent down on him like a heavy stone. "Pregnant," he repeated, almost as though he failed to consider it. "Yes," Azin said, tears welling up in her eyes. "I didn't plan for this to show up, but maybe perhaps it is a signal that we are intended to transport on." Instruct a circle of relatives. Collectively, Chi stared at her, his emotions swirling. The grief for Amaka still lingered, however. Now there has been something else, a new responsibility, a lifestyle's growing internal. After a silence, he nodded slowly. "We will figure this out," he stated, though his voice carried extra resignation than pleasure. Ezen exhaled in comfort, her thoughts already working on how to solidify her vicinity. Similarly, she started out making ready for the child with, months later, excitement. Painting a photo of a satisfied family in Chid's thoughts months later, Azin gave birth to a baby boy. Chidi held his son for the first time, a faint smile crossing his face for a brief second. Ain believed the whole lot become falling into place. She had Chei, a child and a lifestyle she had constantly envied. However, the cracks in her best photograph started to show. The toddler changed into born with a coronary heart disorder, and the medical institution payments quickly piled up. Chei's exhaustion deepened, and his moments of joy have become fleeting. "Your son has a sickle cell, and also a coronary heart the doctor had stated, his voice grave. "He'll want regular care, and probably surgical procedure." The scientific bills had been like a mountain they couldn't climb. Every visit to the hospital drained their financial savings, and Ain felt the load of it pressing on her chest. Chi, once attentive and worrying, had changed. He began leaving the residence early and coming home overdue. burying himself in work. When he changed into home, he slightly spoke, his eyes distant. "And tired, Key? We want to talk, Aina?" stated one evening as he sat at the eating desk, staring at his untouched plate of food. "What's it he had? Been a circle of relatives," replied his voice flat. "I know things are tough right now, however, we're in this together, we're our own family," Azine stated, attaining his hand. Chidi pulled his hand away, his expression cold. "I'm tired. Each day is something else. Health center, bills, the baby's fitness, this house. This isn't the existence I wanted." Izin's coronary heart sank. I am trying. I am doing everything. I will sometimes trying. Isn't always enough," Key stated. "Status up. I need space. Face, do not push me," Azin watched him stroll away, his footsteps heavy with frustration. She felt a lump in her throat, however. No tears came as a substitute. A deep vacancy settled in her chest. She tried the whole lot to win him, returned cooking his favored meals, dressing in garments she knew he preferred, and reminding him of the lifestyles they may have collectively. However, Chidi remained remote, his grief for Amaka lingering like a ghost within the corners of their domestic. The as soon as ideal picture of affection changed into crumbling. Peace by way of peace. The cracks in their bases had grown into deep chasms, and regardless of how difficult Ain attempted, she could not near them as she lay awake at night paying attention to a son's faint respiratory. Ain wondered if this was the existence she had sacrificed the whole lot for. The weight of her pics pressed on her like a heavy stone, and for the primary time she started out to doubt if she may want to hold it all together. The crying children of kids became a consistent inside the residence after their first son. Izen gave beginning to more kids. 4 in general, each child came with their personal struggles. Their 2D daughter turned into born an imbecile with saliva always dripping down his mouth uncontrollably. The 3rd son had developed intellectual delays and paralysis requiring expensive therapy sessions. By the time their 4th toddler changed into born Ain, felt like she became drowning in obligations. Chidi had changed even greater. You become now not the attentive guy who, as soon as made breakfast for Amaka or whispered candy words of love. Alternatively, he was remote, spending maximum of his time at work or away on business journeys. "Gee, the college costs are overdue," Aini said one evening, her voice weary. She'd become balancing a crying toddler on her hip while the older children argued in the historical past. Chi didn't even appearance up from his smartphone. "I'll cope with it," he stated, his tone dismissive when the college is already threatening to send them domestic ICNI. "Pressed," I stated. "I will manage it." Chase snapped, standing up and on foot out of the room. Aini felt a pang of frustration and unhappiness. She was trying to keep the family collectively, but felt like Chidi didn't care anymore. Then, sooner or later, the whole thing came crashing. The whole lot got here crashing down. Aini overheard a cell phone conversation Chidi become having within the living room. "Sure, I will ship the money day after today," he said. "Tell the children I will visit next weekend." Azine froze, her heart pounding. Youngsters. What kids? While Chi ended the decision, Aini confronted him. "Who were you talking to?" she demanded. Chi sighed, rubbing his temples. "I don't have the energy for this, Azini. Do not misinform me, Chidi." "Who are those children you're sending money to?" Chidi stared at her, his face unreadable. "They're mine," he said flatly. Aini's breath caught. "Yours? You suggest you have got different children outdoor this marriage?" "Yes," Chidi answered, his tone unapologetic. "I've been taking care of them similar to I deal with this own family." Azine's niece felt susceptible. She grabbed the threshold of the table for help. "How should you try this?" "To me, Chidi, after the whole thing?" "I've sacrificed for us." Chidi laughed bitterly. "Sacrificed? You think I do not know the chaos you delivered into my lifestyles? You think I don't know what happened to Amaka? Don't act like a victim, Ain. You purchased what you wanted, didn't you?" Azin's face burned with disgrace and anger. She opened her mouth to respond, however no words came out. Chidi walked beyond her, grabbing his automobile keys. I'll be domestic overdue, he stated, leaving without every other look. Aizen stood by myself in the living room, the burden of her selections urgent down on her like a typhoon cloud. The life she had constructed become falling aside, and she or he could not forestall it. Extra youngsters had come, however, as opposed to bringing pleasure that they had best, greater youngsters had come, deepened the cracks of their already damaged basis as the years exceeded every other trouble commenced. Ain started to have nightmares about Emeka inside the goals. Emeka would appear status at the foot of her bed, her face pale and sorrowful. "Why did you do it?" Ainson Emeka would ask. Ain might wake up sweating, her heart racing. She sit up, clutching her chest, looking to calm the hurricane inside her. However, the goals kept coming night after night like uninvited visitors that refused to leave. Someday, as Azina walked through the crowded marketplace, her fingers full of groceries, she notioned she saw a acquainted discern in the distance. The female changed into carrying a simple get dressed and had a gait that was all too familiar. Her heart stopped familiar, her coronary heart stopped Emeka. She whispered, her voice trembling. She dropped her basket and, driven through the crowd, her eyes fixed at the discern Emeka, she referred to as called louder this time. The female became in brief, her face obscured via the sunlight for a second. As in idea, she noticed Emeka's functions, the curve of her cheek, the softness of her lips. However, earlier than Easy may want to reach her, the female disappeared into the gang, swallowed via the sea of humans. Ain stood frozen, her coronary heart pounding like a drum. "It cannot be," she whispered to herself. "She's long past. I recognize she's gone." But the guilt that had been simmering under the floor now bubbled over, consuming her like a wildfire. Every sound, each shadow appeared to remind her of Emeka. The laughter of women inside the market felt like a mockery of her betrayal. The empty corners of her home felt like they were full of Amara's presence, watching, judging. Ezen tried to push the guilt away, however. It clung to her like a too deep pores and skin. Her children's cries appeared like accusations. Chi's cold stares felt like punishment. Even the partitions of the residence seemed to whisper why. Her thoughts became the whole thing changed prison, and Emeka's ghost become the warden haunting her. Each moment the load of her moves turned into not only a burden, it turned into a new tightening around her neck, making every breath tougher to take. Ezen had desired the entirety. Emeka had, however, now she realized she had received not anything, however, regret, sorrow, and the unrelenting ghost of the sister she had betrayed. 25 years after Emeka's disappearance, the entirety, modified Chidi, changed into now a retired businessman, and Azine turned into residing a quiet life, nevertheless, worrying for his or her children one sunny afternoon. A vehicle pulled up in one sunny afternoon front in their house. Azini changed into inside the kitchen, whilst a knock echoed through the house. It wasn't the casual knock of a neighbor or the moved quickly rap of a shipping man. It changed into sluggish, planned, nearly ominous. Who could? "That be Jaidi," muttered, folding his newspaper and heading for the door while he opened it. The world regarded to prevent status there. Dressed surely, but with an air of quiet energy, was Emara. Chid's voice cracked, his palms gripping the dew-body for support. His face became light, his eyes huge with surprise. Ain, listening to the call, iced over, her fingers trembled as the bowl she became keeping slipped and shattered at the floor. Emeka stepped inside, her gaze constant and piercing. "Hi there, Chidi, hi there, Aizen," she stated, her voice calm but sporting the burden of years long past. Via Zen stumbled into the residing room, her heart pounding like a drum. "Emeka," she whispered, her voice slightly audible. It's no longer feasible. You are lifeless." Emeka finished for her, her lips curving right into a faint, sour smile. "Emeka finished. That is what you thought. Isn't always it, Zen?" Chidi, still rooted to the spot, managed to locate his voice. "In which have you been, what, befell to you?" Emeka sighed and sat down, her movement sluggish and planned as though she carried the load of the years on her shoulders. "I assume it is time you both knew the truth," she stated, her voice steady. She began to recount the nighttime of the attack. The thugs had wanted her, their intentions clear. However, whilst she pleaded for her lifestyles, supplying them money, and explaining her friendship with Aini, something surprising came about. They hesitated, Amaka said, her eyes fixed on Aini. They instructed me the whole lot, how you, my so-called sister, had paid them to kill me due to the fact I was standing for your way. Aini's buckled, and she or he sank into a chair, her arms shaking. Amaka, I do not. Interrupt me, Amaka said sharply, her voice slicing via the air like a blade. The Chief Ugo spared my existence. He said he did not want to kill a person who had handiest, ever help others. However, they warned me if I ever came again, that they had end the process. Amaka's gaze softened for a moment, however, simplest and brief. So I left, I disappeared. I started out over in a small metropolis a ways away, but not a day exceeded that. I failed to consider you approximately why you probably did it, and now, after 25 years, I determined I needed to face my beyond, irrespective of the value. Chid's voice trembled with anger, as he became to, Azini, you intend to kill her, Azini. How may want to you after the whole thing? Amaka did for you after all of the years we spent together streamed down Anini's face as she stammered, Chidi. I cannot give an explanation, for I was jealous, I notion. If she changed into long gone, we ought to have a life collectively. Jealous, Cheat's voice rose packed with rage. You destroyed the whole thing, you ruined my lifestyles, her lifestyles, our own family, for what on your selfishness? Amaka stood, her face calm but resolute. I failed to come right here to spoil what is left of your circle of relatives, Chitty. I just needed to inform the truth, to loose myself from the ache I've carried all these years. She turned to Azine, her eyes bloodless. You took everything from me, Azine, my home, my love, my destiny, but you couldn't take my life. And now I depart you with the one aspect you may never get away, your guilt without every other phrase. Amaka walked out of the residence, leaving Chitty and Azin in silence. Azan's SS crammed the room as Chitty stood immobile, his face a mask of devastation. The fact had shattered what little remained of their fragile lives, leaving at the back of most affected the wreckage of betrayal. The residence became heavy with silence after Amaka's departure. Chitty paced backward and forward, his fist clenched, his respiration sharp and choppy. Azini sat, hunched in a nook, her face buried in her arms. The air among them crackled with tension. The load of the truth urgent down like a typhoon approximately to break. Inform me it isn't real, Chitty. In the end, stated, his voice low and dangerous, inform me Amaka was mendacity. Tell me you didn't pay human beings to kill her. Easy raised her tear-streaked face, her lips trembling. Che, I don't know what to say. Say the fact. Che shouted, his voice echoing via the house. Did you do it, Azine? Did you attempt to kill her? The dam broke. Azine fell to her knees, her body shaking with sobs. Yes, she cried, her voice cracking underneath the burden of her guilt. Yes, I did it. I used to be jealous. I used to be irritated. I concept she had the whole lot. Your love, her achievement, the existence I desired. I didn't recognize what else to do. She stared at her, his face twisting with her aggregate of disbelief and disgust. You didn't recognize what else to do, he spat, so that you determined to kill her, to kill the girl who known as you, her sister, the female who relied on you with the whole lot. Ain clutched at his trousers, her tears falling like rain. Chitty, please. I didn't suggest for matters to head to this point I concept I notion. It would make things higher, I notion. We might be satisfied. Chid snigger was bitter, hollow, happy. Do you understand what you have completed to me, to us, to her? Azin became her gaze to the ground, not able to fulfill his fiery eyes. I was incorrect. I recognize I was incorrect. Please forgive me. Chi, I did not assume it would quit like this. I didn't think. You didn't think, Chidi roared, pulling far from her, hold close. You destroyed the whole lot. You took her far from me, and then you definitely came into my existence, pretending to love me, building this sham of a own family on lies. His phrases struck Azine like blows. However, She failed to combat lower back. She had no defense, no excuses left, and Yuichidi persisted, his voice quieter but dripping with venom. You stole years from Amaka. Years she can by no means get lower back. Do you even apprehend what you've completed? Azine sobbed, tougher, but no words came. Chidi stood for a second, his shoulders heaving as he struggled to include his fury. Then he grew to become and walked closer to the door. "Where are you going?" Azine cried, attaining for him everywhere, however. "Right here," Chidi stated, his voice flat. "I can't live in this residence. I cannot have a look at you, now, not after the entirety you've got executed." He paused at the door, turning. Returned to have a look at her, one remaining time. "I loved Amaka with all my coronary heart, and you destroyed me." Without every other word, he left the door slamming shut at the back of him. Azine sat at the bloodless floor, her soaps filling the empty residence. The fact had ultimately popped out, unraveling years of lies and deceit. However, in place of setting her free, it had chained her to the unbearable weight of her personal guilt. Chidi left with not anything but recollections of Amaka. The affection he had misplaced, the life he had dreamed of, and the betrayal that had torn it all aside. The years dragged on, each one heavier than the closing. Azine lived by myself in the same residence she had as soon as shared with Chidi, and their youngsters the walls regarded to echo with reminiscences of the lifestyle she had destroyed. She spent her days sitting on a cautionary story. The porch, watching humans exceeded by way of friends, whispered about her, calling her a murderer and a stated woman. She have become a cautionary tale, a caution to younger girls approximately the dangers of jealousy and betrayal. Someday a set of young women walked through, giggling and chatting. One of them stopped and pointed at Azine. "This is the lady who tried to kill her pleasant buddy for a person," she said loudly. Azine closed her eyes, the phrases reducing deeper than any knife. One night Azine had a dream. She changed into standing in a vivid subject, and Amaka turned into there, smiling at her. Amaka stated softly, "I've forgiven you, however, you want to forgive yourself." I fell to her knees. "Amaka, I don't deserve your forgiveness. I destroyed the whole thing. I am so sorry." Amaka located a hand on her shoulder, let move of the ache. Azine, it's the handiest way to locate peace. While Ain awoke, she felt an odd experience of comfort for the first time in years. She prayed, asking God for forgiveness. Although her existence remained lonely and full of remorse, she found solace in helping others. She commenced sharing her tale with younger girls, cautioning them approximately the risks of jealousy and the consequences of their actions. And so Aina spent the rest of her day searching for redemption. Understanding she may want to by no means undo the past, however, hoping to prevent others from making the same mistakes. I'm hoping you enjoyed the story. If so, please like the video, remark what you discovered from the story, and don't neglect to subscribe to the channel for more captivating tales similar to this one. Thank you.